The first this week of Missouri Politics of 2020. It's an election year. Session's right about to start 3 days from now. And we are joined by the man at the center of it all, the president of the Missouri State Senate, Senator Dave Schatz. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Scott.
So the gavel, you get it tuned up. You give it the hard hits like they used to do back in the day.
No, I'm going to be. It'll be firm. I'll
Situation
say that.
dependent, maybe.
Yeah. No, it'll be firm. It'll be a firm. I'm not much of a guy that likes a milk toast handshake. So my gavel is going to be, it'll be a firm gavel.
No,
so I got to make sure the gals up front are prepared for that. You don't want to scare them. You don't want to, catch them off guard. So you got to be aware of that. But hey, we're going to have a firm gavel starting out.
So once the gavel's in, the prayer and the Senate unfolds, what are some of the things you see as the major things you see as you drive to Jeff City this week? Right
off the bat, I think the conversation last year that we were talking about the redistricting portions of Clean Missouri, and I think right out of the gate we're going to see some activity and work on that to try to bring.
Let me pitch you the argument. I have a high regard for Sean Nichols, and I think as a person that's been around politics for several years, Clean Missouri was a very well done initiative, very well done political project. It did some ethics things that, I don't think anybody really cared much about either way in the Capitol. But the redistricting thing was different. The argument I've heard from conservatives is, hey, this was two separate things. They brought the redistricting part in under the ethics thing. It should be a standalone thing. We want to put that to the ballot. Is that the argument you're going to make? Let's put the redistricting plan out?
I think that the majority of people that voted on the ethics portion of that probably believed that was the right thing to do, but we're totally unaware of the redistricting portions of it and how that particularly impacts them and potentially their representation in the future. And so I think that's something that we need to take back before the people so they understand exactly what's being proposed to them. And I think that's what we're going to try to do in a measure that goes back to those individuals, say, hey, this is what we believe is the right process for redistricting in Missouri. And so I think that's the issue, and I think we'll see that work its way through the process.
Taking a step back, though, you're seeing more and more substantial pieces of Missouri public policy decided at the ballot box of these referendums. And this is what Republicans do in states where they're the superminority, like California.
Sure.
If the Democrats nominate a socialist presidential candidate, it's likely they maintain a superminority status in Missouri. Is there a way that you start looking at making it harder to put these things on the ballot?
Well, I think we've had conversations. I think IP reform is something that we're going to have a conversation on. I definitely think when we talk about when it comes to Missouri's Constitution and the threshold that we ought to be looking at to change that. When we look at the United States Constitution and how difficult it is to make changes there, I just don't think that every time the wind changes direction, we ought to be enshrining things in our state's Constitution. Having it done through referendum on just statutory things is one way, but when we start putting things in the Constitution, I think we ought to have a conversation. What should that look like? Should there be a higher threshold, or the percentage in order for it to pass should be something we should be having a conversation about.
Let's talk about something that is a subject every year the Republicans have been in charge: tort reform. You did some tort reform last year.
Sure.
It looks like there's always something as the courts evolve and issue new rulings. What is the tort reform issue that will be at the center of the debate this year?
Well, there's several. There's going to be a multitude. The Merchandising and Manufacturing Practices Act is something that will be on there. But punitive damages and caps is something that obviously is probably going to take the number one position when it comes to tort reform. I think there will be a multitude of issues, but obviously, there's a time when you can get a certain number of things done, but when big ticket items like punitives, Senator White has filed that piece of legislation, kind of worked it up to the point last year where we think we're in a good starting point, but I think that will be our number one priority, and I think that as a coalition of folks that are the business community that's truly interested in tort reform measures, that's probably the one that's going to take top billing at this point.
Something I hear you talk about every time I visit with you, not on the show, you bring up roads in some form or fashion.
Roads and bridges, yeah.
Is there, last year, huge victory for yourself, huge victory for the state, really, repairing the Roachport Bridge in a responsible way. Senator Blunt came in and was helpful. What is the next step? I mean, I think a lot of folks have driven around the state for the holidays. I know I took 67 down to West Butler County. What is a rational plan that could get through the Senate this year to address road funding?
I am not sure that there is a rational plan that can make it through the Senate that really truly addresses the problem that we need. Obviously, one thing that I'm pretty sure that we're not going to go down the road is through the general revenue process of trying to fund roads and bridges through general revenue. Myself, the appropriations chair, and several of us others don't believe that general revenue is the right way to fund roads and bridges. We took the step that we took last year on the bonding proposal because I felt it was critical in order for us to make sure that we were able to be in play for the infra grant. We were successful, and we'll see about $1 billion investment over passing that particular legislation, and the money that we put down, the $50 million was put in for 50-50 matching, will result in about $1 billion in infrastructure investment in the next few years. And I think that's very critical, seeing that the 80-some million that came from the federal government government.
Let me ask
But
you
it's
a
going to be
question.
hard.
I hear Republicans do it's the Republican three-step, waste, fraud, and abuse. And I'm sure you could cut waste, fraud, and abuse out of any system. I don't think that's a serious thing, problem MoDOT. I don't think, can you really improve Missouri's transportation grid without new funding, substantial new funding into MoDOT?
No, not really. And I think that, government is inefficient. We all understand that. And there are areas that MoDOT can improve on, but there's not a pot of gold that we're looking for that are going to be able to address the issues that we're truly facing. And I truly believe without really addressing the motor fuel tax is the most effective way for us to address the problem. The users of the system, the ones that pay for it, and obviously there's a large amount of revenue that's generated by folks that are traveling through our state they're not paying their fare, because we should be collecting them on our motor fuel tax here in the state of Missouri. The only way to collect it on the people that are traveling through is to raise the motor fuel tax. And I think that's the most effective way to do that. But I don't think there's any shape, form, or fashion that we can get that through in an election year. Obviously, there is the House. It will be a tough issue for them to take up to any kind of, whether it was a measure that would go to the ballot. I think they would be challenged in order to vote on that in an upcoming election year. I think it'll be challenging for us unless it's some part of a broader tax reform package. Transportation funding will be very challenging to try to do something, and I think we're going to have to look down the future in order to try to address that.
Is that more of an issue if we're sitting here a year from now talking about the next legislative session that might be a higher possibility?
I think the possibility exists, yes. After this next election cycle, I think that we've seen the turnover every 2 years. The House has to reelect members. People are concerned about potential primaries and things of that nature. And again, I came over from the House. I ran through that process. You run it's almost like you're in constant campaign mode. And so until you get people that are mature enough in the process, they're not afraid. They think they do the right thing. And I think we'll see some folks that would be willing to, in the future, maybe take that step and say, hey, we need to address this. This is a true issue in the state of Missouri that's facing us. We need to fix and solve.
But another issue that came up, there was a working committee of mayors come up with some ideas for some gun control as a way to address crime. The governor, I think, said he would look at whatever proposal they did. The more liberal media folks said, the governor is going to be for gun control, which I think, if you know Mike Parson, is maybe what they wanted to hear him say. I did see the floor leader in the House say, pretty much an affront to the governor, we're not going to hear any gun control measures. In the Senate, this working group of mayors, serious people, doesn't feel to me like something that could make it through the Senate if gun control was any large part of the package.
Well, I think that one of the things that we did, Scott, was we formed an interim committee on public safety. Mm-hmm. Senator Leiba chaired that committee, and I
saw the media do the same with you. They you were trying to be courteous and respectful, and they said, you're for gun control, and I'm like,
that's not necessarily the case. And I said anything that impacts law-abiding citizens' ability to have their Second Amendment rights infringed is not something we're really going to take serious consideration into. But if there's something out there that someone could bring to the table that is some modification or a change to something that might make sense when we're talking about criminals, people that aren't supposed to have guns, things of that nature, enforcing stricter penalties, bail. We're seeing people being soft on crime and things that are going on right now that's impacting law enforcement's ability to take guns off the street and get these criminals are the ones that are creating the problems. It's not law-abiding citizens, gun owners that are the problem. So I think that having that conversation, but a piece of legislation that I have sponsored that takes the residency requirement out of the city of St. Louis so that we can put another 120 to 150 law enforcement people. Hopefully removing that barrier allows them to attract officers and fill those voids and vacancies that are there. That's one way we can address public safety, is putting more officers on the street. And so I will have a conversation if those mayors and people bring solid ideas on what they think can improve public safety, because we're all interested in that. We want to make sure that that this region isn't known for our crime rate. That shouldn't be what we should be distinctive for.
It seems to me like there's a group of maybe more urban media folks that maybe they never had to go feed cows, that they hang on the words because they're so pro-gun control themselves. Anybody that would come into their side, it looks like they want to see a quote so bad that sometimes see where it's not there.
I think that's the case. I think again, I think the governor's probably been mischaracterized. I think I've been mischaracterized when we've had conversations about what we'd be willing to take a look at. But again, I think we're reasonable people. And again, if you could bring something that's been effective, you can show it's a proven method or something, let's take a look at it, let's talk about it. But just saying, blanket that we're not going to be willing to even entertain any conversation at all, I think
they represent a lot of Missourians too.
They do, absolutely do. And so I think we'll just have to see where that conversation ends up.
Last question. I think a lot of folks, obviously, you don't have to look very hard for drama in the Senate. It's usually the place you can find it in state government. You have a unique situation. You have a sub-caucus of Republicans that have set themselves aside, the conservative caucus. People want to, I think there's a lot of folks that like to try to project what that relationship is with yourself, Caleb Rowden, and the other senators. What is the relationship between yourself and the other senators in that caucus?
Oh, well, again, I think that while we're all members of one larger caucus, I think the Republican caucus, we're all conservatives at the end of the day, and so, but all of those individuals that are members of that caucus, I've got good working relationships with, have good conversations with. We don't always agree on every particular way of things that should go through the process, tax policy, things of that nature. But again, we're going to have some differences there, but there's not a lot of consternation between the members, and I'm going to have conversations with each and every one of them, help them try to work their priorities through the process. That's my job, is to make sure that we give everybody a fair shake and an opportunity to try to get their issues taken care of. And so I'll be doing that, working with each and every member of our majority and some of the folks on the other side of the aisle.
Interesting thing, observation I've seen as well, maybe not all of you are members of their caucus. They're all members of the caucus that you lead.
That's absolutely correct. So
we hope you'll come back and talk about this as session unfolds.
Well, it's going to be interesting. Like I said, it gets started here next Wednesday, and so we'll be looking forward to it.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it.
We wrap back with our Opinion Maker panel. Executive Director of the Missouri Republican Party, Gene Evans, joins us. But first, go to showmissouri.com. We were up in Hamilton, Missouri, looking at the Missouri Star Quilt Company, Jenny Doan and the whole family, how that one company has revitalized the whole town in northwest Missouri. We'll be right back after this.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads, because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations, and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers
Your energy needs are changing. That's why at Ameren, Missouri, we're not waiting on the future. We're building it with the Smart Energy Plan, advancing thousands of projects across the state, helping reduce emissions through cleaner energy sources, boost reliability with self-healing equipment, and better withstand storms with new composite poles. Moving Missouri forward and bringing us all a little closer together. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. Opinion Maker panel time. Gene Evans, former representative, now the Executive Director of the Missouri Republican Party. Welcome back to the show.
Happy New Year. Glad to be here.
Jack Coatar, Alderman of the City of St. Louis. I would say one of maybe 2 or 3 people in elected office. People say the Democrat Party's done, and I'm like, there's 2 or 3 people. Jack Coatar could be governor one day. Brian Williams, Rizzo?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe. You never know.
Welcome back,
Brian.
sir.
Thanks, Cap.
And Mike Lewis, the head of the AFL-CIO in Missouri. Welcome back to the show. Good holiday?
Great holiday. Happy New Year to everybody. A lot of good family time.
World Peace Prize winner, correct?
That is correct. I was quite honored to receive that for hard work that the Missouri AFL-CIO did to improve the lives of working people.
Congratulations, sir. Well deserved.
Congrats.
Let's talk about something that people are questioning as well deserved. It's the Democrat presidential thing. I think we used to see where Missouri would split their tickets. People would, it's a show me state, very independent. Right. I think that's a memory now. We vote very much with a national trend. Maybe start off +5 Republican and go from there. Democrats looking at some candidates. It just looks to me as a person who's always been a Republican. You either nominate Biden and the state becomes competitive, or you nominate one of the other more socialistic candidates. I don't know that Democrats in Missouri can compete with having to carry that up the hill.
No, in the general election, I mean, I'm not sure the Democrats can compete. If Biden's the nominee, we'll have a better chance. But I think the more important election in the short term is the Super Tuesday primary, where Missouri is actually going to matter on the Democratic side. You know, every delegate's going to count in this race. I think we're looking towards a fight that's going all the way to the convention over the summer for the nomination. And so all those delegates are going to matter, including Missouri. So I think we're going to at least have a lively, raucous primary on Super Tuesday here.
You know, you do politics all day, every day. It just looks to me like we used to be this bellwether state that would kind of pick and choose down the ballot. I haven't seen any evidence of that in the last several election cycles. The top of the ticket really matters. Trump still looks extremely popular in Missouri. It seems like the more he ticks off the CNN newsroom or the New York Times, the more people love him in New Madrid.
Right.
If there's an Elizabeth Warren on the top of the ticket, that you probably go to bed the night before the election very soundly.
Yeah, I think so, for sure. That would be a great one. Bernie Sanders, who's the big fundraiser on that side. And I think part of what you're seeing is that a lot of the Missouri Democrats feel like the party has left them, at least at the national level. It's gone so far to the left that we're getting an influx of people who say they used to be Democrats and vote Democrat that support the president and want to support Republican causes because the national party has left them.
So it even comes down to this. I've noticed you've done a very effective job. You even got some of the more liberal newspapers to ask Nicole Gallagher where she was on impeachment. Mm-hmm. We probably know where they are on impeachment, but it just creates problems for her. I mean, I think impeachment is probably not popular in Missouri.
No, that or free health care for illegal aliens, nationalized Medicare, Medicare for all. That's not very popular. We have a lot of working people here who've fought very hard to get good health care and they don't want it taken away. So there are a lot of national issues. And quite honestly, there's a fissure in the party. Like, what kind of Democrat are you? We don't have that on our side. Like, you're Republican. We have some differences of opinion on things, but people will pretty much stick to the platform. When you look at the Democrat candidates, what kind of a Democrat are you? Are you an old school Democrat, a Missouri Democrat? Are you a Nancy Pelosi Democrat? And right now, we have to assume if your donors are the same as Nancy Pelosi and you haven't said that you're not that kind of a Democrat, then we assume you are.
Looking into the future, though, do you think that's a problem that Missouri Republicans have to watch for? You do see some folks that are very extreme. A lot of suburban folks, very, very, very extreme. Contrasted with more of an everyday folksy rural Republican. Is that a problem you see coming in the next few cycles of those two having a hard time living in the same party?
I think that we sort of went through that. We had the Tea Party Libertarian and then the right wing, and that was going on. This is not that different. So when Obama was president, you saw some of that on our side, and we've learned from it. So there's a lot of unity going forward, a lot of inclusiveness on our side. So even if we disagree, we have different caucuses within the legislature. We're still all Republicans. We're all on the same team, and going into 2020, we all work together.
Michael Lewis, you could take Joe Biden to the Washington County Fair. You could take him to O'Fallon. You could take him to Festus, and I think Democrats would be fine to be seen with him. You couldn't take Bernie Sanders anywhere except maybe a few blocks in the Central West End, right?
I think this election is very important because Democrats have a lot of issues to consider. But I think the number one issue they have to consider is who can win. And who can win is what this is all about. You're going to have to put some of your personal issues, whether they be the far left social issues or whether they're right down the middle of the road. You're going to have to put them aside, and you're going to have to vote for somebody who can beat Donald Trump.
Can anyone, could Bernie Sanders get your members to vote for someone who's a socialist?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to what my members are going to do. I think that they are more concerned about infrastructure and other things that create jobs.
And it's important to note, no votes have been cast yet, right? So we don't, these are all theoretical questions. Right. I think this long, drawn-out primary process on the Democratic side is going to be healthy for us. I think it's going to, we're going to air some grievances. Yeah. It's going to further narrow the field, and it's going to show the cream of the crop candidates that actually can compete nationally and in the important battleground states are going to rise to the top.
In an age where it probably makes sense to run for president, you get more Twitter followers, you can sell a book or whatever. The Democrats have had a very good, logical process that has winnowed that debate stage down. Yeah. I think it's probably something the Republicans could learn from 4 years from now.
Potentially, if they have a big, messy primary in their hands, I think there is something to learn with the metrics that the DNC has set just sort of to stay in the race, to stay on the debate stage. I think that's good. I think there are some questions about some candidates who have, maybe should have a voice going forward. We've lost a number of good quality minority candidates that I think's voice is important in this process. But, the ground rules were the ground rules. They were set out from the beginning. Everyone knew what they were, and you had to raise the money and get the donors and poll well enough to stay in the race.
Nicole Galloway is going to have the impeachment question coming, or probably till she answers it.
Yeah.
Give her some advice. How would you handle an unpopular impeachment by your party?
So, at some point, just take a position. It's easier to just take a position, maybe take a couple hits and move on. I think if she's a Democrat, the way this impeachment process played out and is basically a party line vote, I think it's going to be hard for her to be against the impeachment. But at some point, just give an answer and move on.
This is a problem, and you're in a leadership position, or which she is now, and she wants to a promotion, and she won't take a position. She's not a leader. If you're a leader, you say where you stand on things. You want to know where the governor stands on something, he will tell you. And if it's misinterpreted, like some things were recently, he comes right back at you and says, this is how I feel about it. Check my record. This is where I'm at. There's no question about who he is or what he stands for. Where's Nicole?
Well, I don't know that's true because we've got a governor that his highway patrol is investigating illegal gambling, and he's not sure if illegal gambling is actually a problem. He's saying out of one side of his mouth that he is for the will of the people when it comes to Medicaid for all, if that passes statewide. Yet he's part of the group of Republicans that want to overturn parts of Clean Missouri, which was passed by 62% of the people. So I don't think it's fair to say that this governor's clear and takes clear positions on all of them.
Let me ask you a question. You brought up Clean Missouri. You're a very talented legislator at the Board of Aldermen. Clean Missouri was a very well put together initiative. It had
62% of the vote statewide.
So, do you think if it was on its own, if the two parts of Clean Missouri were split up, the redistricting would get 62%?
I don't know, but it wasn't. It was one vote. I trust that voters were competent enough to understand the proposal, that it dealt with both ethics reform and redistricting, and they passed it.
So if it goes before the voters again and it's just one or the other, then they have the opportunity.
And I think they'll pass it again.
But the legislature doesn't have the ability to overturn Clean Missouri, nor does the governor. That needs to be made clear. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there that we can undo this. They can put it back on the ballot, but they can't change it. All they can do is put another proposal that's more clear. And if, as a lawyer, you should know there's a lot of unclear language in the Clean Missouri bill that passed. There's a lot of litigation. There's a lot of confusion on campaigns about some of the pieces that relate to campaign finance.
There are.
And that needs to be clarified. And because it was done so messily, it would be nice to have something that cleaned it up. Cleaner
Lewis,
Missouri.
You've watched a lot of sessions. If the Republicans say, okay, we're going to put the redistricting proposal as it stands out for an up or down vote by the people of the state of Missouri, it feels like that gets to the Senate and gets to the ballot.
I think it does, and I think the people clearly stand with what they've already passed. Not for any reason other than we passed this as the state of Missouri, as voters here, and we're going to be like, take Wisconsin, for example. They elected a governor. There was ballot initiative to take the governor out. They said, no, we made a mistake. We'll take him out when it comes the time to take him out, and that's going to be at the ballot box. And I think Missouri is a lot like Wisconsin in that respect. We've made a decision. Let's move forward, and you all in Jeff City live with it.
Is that where Senate Democrats get to, is we'll let this go to the ballot if you just put the clean proposal up or down?
I don't know where it's going to go because, right now it's only the talk of putting it back on the ballot. I have no idea if there's going to be any kind of amendments on that. I have no idea. So
Well,
we got to wait and see what the language says.
If Democrats are so find it so important to respect the will of the voters, then why are they trying to impeach the president when we have an election in November? Let the people
Why are
decide.
the Republicans trying to bring right to work back up when the will of the people?
They haven't.
Almost 70. There's bills introduced again
Anybody
this
can
year.
introduce a bill on anything, but those bills have seen no time.
But then again, the governor says, well, it was the will of the people, but if it comes to my desk, I'm going to have to really look at it. That's not respecting the will of the people.
Isn't it true that in
hasn't come to his
politics
desk.
you want to respect the will of the people when you agree with the will of the people?
Yeah, when you agree and it's convenient for you. That's correct.
Let's talk about another interesting. Give me a prediction, though. Does this come back to the ballot in some form?
Clean Missouri?
Yes. The redistricting part.
Yes, I think it
Does
probably
it,
will come
does
back
it
to the
does
ballot.
it pass a second time?
Well, I guess that depends on what passing looks like. Are they going to overturn the current proposal? I don't think so. I really don't think voters will go for that. They voted for one thing, and I think they're going to want to keep what they voted for. You got to at least give it a chance.
The old
and I think
Missouri
ultimately
plan was a bunch of judges, Republican and Democrat.
it always went to the judges because the commission, the bipartisan commission, could never agree on anything.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think having more competitive districts ultimately is a good thing for both parties in this state and for the state as a whole to have more competitive elections and a more balanced legislature.
But at the end of the day, you don't find the most conservative members of the Missouri Republican Party are the judges. They're generally not the right-wingers in Missouri politics. I don't think these maps are particularly partisan to start with.
No, I think the maps on both sides, you've got really heavily Republican districts, really heavily Democratic districts. I think all of those districts could benefit from some more competition.
Does it get to the ballot?
Yes.
Do the Republicans actually put money in it this time and beat it back?
Good question.
Let's talk about something. It's interesting to me. I read a thing, I think it's state media or something. They put out that the governor had the mayors in. They had a working council come together and come up with some ideas. These mayors truly believe, they represent a lot of Missourians, that some gun control measures would be good. You saw the governor be nice to them, and of course the NPR says, well, he's for gun control.
Right.
I find it funny that it could, I'm not saying it is, but maybe the reporter was liberal. Who would know? I would almost bet my life on it. And they might want to see gun control measures passed, and so they write the governors for gun control, almost like they did with him with Medicaid, where he said, well, I have to respect the Constitution.
Right. Yeah, all you got to do is look at his voting record. You know, throughout his career, the governor has always voted in favor of law-abiding citizens having the right to the Second Amendment. He's not in favor. He's gone on the radio. He's gone and done interviews since then explaining how that was misconstrued. It was a private meeting. I don't know how they came. He was never directly quoted, but saying everything's on the table is completely different than saying I'm for gun control or I want red flag laws or I want any of those other things.
I asked a gal to prominently live at high school one time, and she didn't say, of course not, no way. So I took it as a maybe or hard yes. And Michael, it is interesting. You got these mayors do represent a lot of Missourians, and they deal with these issues more closely than anyone in state government. Really, they think these are the good things. I think the governor, whatever people might think of him, is a respectful, professional person. I think he was being nice to them.
He is. He is a very respectful person. He's a nice guy to talk to. Do I think that he takes a hard stance? We were talking about Nicole having to take a stance on impeachment. Well, the governor certainly has had an opportunity to talk about things that he's going to take a hard stance on. What's he going to do on infrastructure? What's he going to do with right to work? He hasn't taken that stance. What is his stance? I don't know.
And look, I obviously represent downtown St. Louis, the neighborhood just south of
Articulate
downtown.
the case for why gun control should be a part of it.
We have a gun violence crisis in our major cities. We had over 190 people killed by guns in the city of St. Louis last year. In Kansas City, we had over 150, right around 150 people killed by guns. This year alone, on the first day of the new year, 6 people were killed by guns in the city of St. Louis. Something's got to change. And I know everyone wants to say, we can't have any restrictions. This has gotten worse as we've loosened gun laws in Missouri. As we've gone to a constitutional carry state, the amount of gun violence in our cities has gotten worse. And so what works in rural Missouri doesn't necessarily translate to what works in the cities in this state. And I talk to the mayor almost every day. I know how frustrated she is. Her family's been personally impacted by gun violence in a very serious way.
Yeah.
This is something that she takes very seriously, and we're looking for help. And if the answer isn't we're going to limit guns in certain public places or require more restrictions for permits, help us with something.
Our answer
Maybe
has
it
to
is
be
red
we got a
flags.
minute left. Who won the week?
Illinois. They passed the recreational marijuana law bill. My understanding is that there were more Missouri license plates over there than there were Illinois license plates, and they're going to benefit from all those taxes to fight
Some of them
the
may have been
exact
gold license
things.
plates. Who won the week?
$3.2
Jack's
million already for Illinois in the first day. I think in the city of St. Louis, it's the status quo once again. I wasn't thrilled about everything in the airport privatization plan and how the process was playing out, but I would have liked to have seen the proposals. In the days afterwards, we saw some Post-Dispatch reporting about some of the ideas, and people
Not
are
bad.
saying, "Oh, these were good ideas."
Who won the week?
Scott Fitzpatrick, recent polling, the least known member of our team that's running for re-election is over 50%. That's a great sign for him. He's an awesome person, as you know,
Sure.
and it looks good for him going into 2020.
I'm going to say Sam and Angelica Gladney brought Penelope Gladney, the first baby, I believe, of Missouri politics for 2020. We will see you back for the full year here on This Week in Missouri Politics. Election year is going to be fun.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, Spire, and Sterling Bank.